Hey everyone, I'm Sarah.
Oh, hi, I'm Matthias.
Well, hello, Matthias.
Hi, Sarah.
So we thought, with our book coming out, our book, The Intentional Organization, it's coming out this spring of 2025. And we thought it would be fun to take a look back and talk about how we came about the idea of writing the book and kind of the process of writing the book. Can you remember back that far,
It's
Matthias?
such a long time ago. I was just telling someone today that we started writing this in 2020, and they were surprised slash shocked, I will say. And it's been a long time, and it's hard to remember that year. I mean, there's other stuff that happened in the world that year, but it's been a journey since then, especially the last couple of months.
It sure has. Heavy sigh, heavy sigh.
Very heavy. What do you remember of that journey? Of the beginnings in particular?
In the beginning, I remember the I remember the excitement. I do remember feeling like, oh wow, we're gonna do this. We're gonna write a book together, and feeling really like, okay, this is a new thing. Like it was a new muscle, like beginner's mind, and that felt
Hmm.
that felt felt really cool to be back in that state of beginner's mind. I've never written a book before myself, and then quickly that shifted to like, oh no, I'm writing a book. Can I do this? Am I qualified to do this? Like all this doubt of, well, I'm writing a leadership book. And then, I think what I'm describing is really the creative journey, because then it gets to overwhelm, because it was like, oh wow, I have to write a book. Like, and we started coming up with these topics, and it started to really become like work of having to sit down with a blank sheet of paper, so to speak, and having to write. Do you remember all that?
I do. I do. I mean, it was I think 2020 Reaction Commerce, where we met and worked together, just got sold. And we were still meeting each week, even after that happened, just to stay connected and stay committed. And I think, remember even earlier than this, 2019 something, or the vivid moment of walking into your front yard in LA where your partner Tess asked us, so what's the next thing you're going to be doing after this? And this was just a fun thing to think about. And I think it was in our podcast conversation with Jerry Colonna of Reboot, where he brought up the metaphor of the vessel and the contents, where the vessel is what stays stable. It stays constant. Right. And the contents is what is dynamic, what changes over time. And, our relationship or us working together is somewhat the vessel, and it doesn't really matter that much what the contents is. And I think at some point we just figured out, well, before we think about other things, about deeper things, well, let's focus on a book. That's something where we can share our experiences, our struggles starting and running businesses, our struggles in management roles. And that's how we got to 2020. It was, it was for me very civilized. It's just writing something, writing anything and turning that into something that's coherent is a ginormous challenge, as we now know at the tail end of it. I think at some point we had 130,000 words in a document somewhere. And that was our starting point for, then trying to turn it into something. Yeah, those are my memories of the early times.
So many good memories in there. Oh, I was just remembering 130,000 words and realizing that, most books are what, 80, 90,000, 70,000 words, so we were we're overachievers. But yeah, I remember, it really comes back to after selling the company, after selling Reaction Commerce, we just wanted to stay connected. We felt like there was still more that we had to do together.
Hmm.
The idea for a book just seemed like something we both had had in the back of our minds. And I don't know, we had more to say about what it's like to build a company. And I think also just, it's important to note that we we share so much of the same philosophies around building companies and building teams. And, we're basically the anti-hustle culture, anti-growth at all costs, anti-capitalism at all costs, and really trying to build teams and companies that treat people like humans, right? I don't know. I
Hmm.
think like that's such a big part. Like, I don't know. There's just no book out there. It's kind of, this might sound arrogant, but I feel like this is the book I wanted. Like this is the book that we wanted to exist that I just haven't seen out there.
Hmm.
I think that was another reason, right?
Yeah. I think there are some books that, follow a similar philosophy as ours in the spirit of the book itself. But yeah, there were in a lot where, at the time at least, where you felt like I'm stuck somewhere, in my growth or in the work that I need to do on my organization, which is what our philosophy is big on. Like we focus a lot on the organization and the people in it, with the idea that success, revenue, all of that flows directly from that. That's the approach, right? And there was not, whenever we felt stuck, there was not a lot to turn to. Like we made a lot of stuff up ourselves. We, got ideas from other founders and made those our own. But getting even to those ideas, it's like, here's a way to do something, right? That is simple, practical, approachable, and that I could even turn into my own thing. There wasn't a lot like this or anything that I remember from management books. I think we even started out wanting to write a memoir about our time as founders, right? It's like just to talk about the struggle itself and, offer commiseration and also support and help to other founders who are, and as our clients are these days, going through the same experience still. But over time, it turned into, well, we could, also share everything that we've learned to make this an actually useful book. I think that's what it turned out to be. Like that's what the early feedback that we've gotten has told us so far. We share a lot of our own anecdotes, like a lot of our struggles about, not good and bad. It's like this things we thought had worked out, uh, things we messed up, and then talk about how we resolved them, and always, get to a certain level of depth in even our own anecdotes and also in the solutions that we offer, but also offer everyone who reads the book to take their own path with what we're offering them. There's no prescriptive framework that we have trademarks on. It's just, here's what worked. Here's what worked for us. Here's what we used. It might work for you, but you could start here. Start here, make this your own. Do the smallest thing you can to see if this is working, and then iterate from there. That's funnily enough also become our approach, or one of our company values, is to focus on experimentation, right? Rather than, it's still big processes, big frameworks. Start with something really small and then iterate, see what's working, see if it is working at all, and then go from there. And I think that's what makes our book different. And that's what really, again, like there were, as you said, there weren't a lot of books or any books whatsoever out there that were helpful, right? Especially in this messy and relentless stuff that is thrown at you as a founder or as an executive for that matter, there where you need to find a solution, right? And move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Messy and relentless. I love that.
Mhm.
It's a really, really good way to put it. Yeah, I think you summarized so much really well. I'm really proud of, the book contains, it's part memoir. It's also, like you said, just has so many frameworks and different reflections, where, we hope that our readers will, take those into account, take them into their heart, and really contemplate and consider. There's journaling lines, right on the page to encourage, someone to pause and to really think. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think like that covers a lot of the, you know, why we wrote the book in kind of like the early days. One thing I think we should cover is, we are geographically challenged. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
in Los Angeles and Matthias is in Berlin. We're 9 hours separated, and that's not easy. I thought, maybe we should talk a little bit about how we work together and kind of how we resolved conflicts and tensions during the creative process, during the book writing process. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any memories?
I
Any
mean,
flash?
I have many memories when it comes to time zones. I was just talking to someone earlier, a coaching client, and we talked about time zones. And I remembered a conversation I had years ago with another founder. We talked about distributed teams, which I've been a part of for, I think, 12, 13 years now. But they asked me, how did you solve the time zone problem? And my only answer was, you can't solve it. It's an impossibility to solve the time zone problem. It's just they're there, and you either decide how to work across this many time zones with whatever trade-offs and consequences that has, and also benefits, or you don't. That's a solution to this time zone problem, or a way to work with it. And I think we've come up with some quite interesting ways to solve that over time. Like the writing a book together over time, I've come to look at it a lot like working on a software project together. I think we've adopted some of these techniques over time that were quite helpful. For a time, especially in the heavy editing phases, we paired on the document together. Whenever we got edits back, we in a Google Doc, we went through them, discussed each of them, and then assigned homework. It's like, I'm going to take care of this, or do you want to take care of that one?
Yep.
And did whatever changes needed to happen, and then came back the next day or the next day, and have this kind of nice cycle that also created a level of, well, a nice rhythm for one, and just commitment and accountability to each other. And the chunks were never big. They were just always like, here's a paragraph that needs rewriting, or here we need to add a paragraph to this thing, or remove one and still make the flow nicer. It was all manageable, and I like that flow in particular. Like, it was quite productive. Like, we still met like in a video call, but because we had this homework, we could keep that compact. It wasn't like a 4-hour pairing session. It was like, let's get together in 45 minutes, review this, discuss this, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. A lot of good memories there. I too really liked that editing phase where we were getting the edits back from our editors and pairing on that, assigning each other, you do this, I'll do this, and tagging each other. And early days, we when we only had kind of a list of topics, we kind of divided. Like, hey, I'll write about this. I'll take this chapter. I'll take this chapter. One of us would get busy. I know I like still had a full-time job while I was navigating and trying to write on the side, and would feel bad that I wasn't writing as much. And it just, I don't know, it kind of had an ebb and flow like almost all creative projects do, right?
Yeah.
Where I'd get a creative spark and I'd be like, within a few hours, I'd crank out a whole chapter, and feel great about it. Or then it would turn out to our editor and be like, this is not good.
Mm.
And we'd have to redo it. But yeah, when one of us was busier than the other, kind of just natural handoffs, or you could take something or I could take something, or if we were stuck on an area, we could talk about it in one of our video calls, which I think is, yeah, like doing any sort of project like this across cultures and across time zones makes it even harder. But it
Mm-hmm.
really forced us, I think, to even be more explicit and more intentional about the work.
Yeah. And I think in a way it is ebb and flow, not just in the creative process, also in the, when life happens, which, this full-time job, or, I think we both went through renovation projects also over these years, which also took quite a lot of focus and sap an incredible amount of energy, as we both can now attest to. Some things
Forgot about
just,
forgot
I'm
about the
sorry.
renovation.
I'm sorry that it's hate to bring it back. For me, that's still very fresh. Um, but I mean, some things then just ended up taking longer. And also in a different lens, the book feels timeless in what we're talking about, right? It's not like talking about some new way of managing teams or structuring organizations. It's just straightforward, actionable things that you can use, that you could have used 10 years ago, and that you could probably very likely use 5 years or 10 years from now, maybe
Yep.
even longer.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
like that. It's just some stuff just took longer. Like it just took also longer to get back to it. At some points, we just had slumps, and in a weird way, it was a blessing and a curse that we didn't have, someone breathing down our necks, to get this done. It was ready when it was ready.
Yep. Yep. Very true. Uh, okay, so I'm famous for asking this question, which is, what's your favorite? But I curious to hear, like, if you have a favorite chapter, or a favorite couple chapters. I certainly do, but I'll you answer first.
Okay.
One, what's your favorite chapter, Matthias?
Favorite chapter. I think my favorite chapter is our chapter on communication. And I think and I will list more favorites. I usually don't just have one. Um uh, it is the last chapter that we added, and this was already like as we were closing down the first round of edits. We went through one or two of our chapters and realized that there were patterns in there that we need to express in a different way. And so we, started putting together an outline for a chapter in communication. And we did that together in the very room that you're now sitting in, where all of the different pieces that we figured contributed to communication in an organization were neatly, on neatly written down on sticky notes and stuck to the window that you're looking out of. And then it was a much shorter burst of like everyone is picking a topic and we're just gonna spend an hour or two writing this. And then we get to the next one. But it was almost illuminative in this, like, this chapter seemed like a beautiful culmination of the book itself. Like it came to the conclusion that, communication that's a thing. As you like to say, all problems are people problems, and all problems are communication problems. Or is it the other way around?
All problems are people problems, and all people problems are communication problems.
That's right. That's what it is. I just think this is very true. Like we came to describe it as communication being the fabric that's woven throughout an organization, and that is really what a company's culture is. And I think there's that all of that is what makes this chapter so great. It's also very dense. Like it's probably the densest chapter that we have. That's my favorite, and I will just throw in two more. I think the I like the chapter on feedback specifically because it's so practical, and yet the approach that we take to feedback, it's very simple, but so counter to how feedback is generally given and received. Like I get that like all the time working with clients. The feedback processes are strange and sometimes just unnecessarily difficult or just too generic or abstract. I think we just found a beautiful approach to that. That's again is simple, practical, and easily adjusted to whatever your situation or organization is. And I think the third one it's one of the shorter ones, is about accountability, where we just talk about a very different take, very non-conventional take on what accountability is and how it pushes responsibility not to an individual and takes it away from a thinking in terms of consequences, but really looks at it from an angle of support, right? Accountability works best. You can bring about accountability when, say an individual is expected to do a thing, but they have, as a manager, they have your full support in that work, right? And support meaning coaching, mentoring, active feedback, and they know what is expected of. Those are my three favorites.
Hmm.
What are yours?
Oh, so many good choices. Some good choices. Yeah, I mean, as you know, I think my favorite is also our chapter on communication, intentional communication. Partly for everything you said, it's the only chapter that we worked on synchronously together here in Los Angeles, and so that's really special because it was just, you know, really creative and fun. And I just remember us, like you said, sitting here and, I'm writing this section, you're writing that, and okay, go to the next, and like, it also, like, it took us a while to get to that stage. Like, we had kind of written communication, we'd written few versions, and it just didn't feel right. And I know for me as a manager and former founder leader, I just got it all wrong. I equated communication with like how many meetings I was having or check-ins and one-on-one, but not really with the outcomes. And I think once we shifted to really thinking about kind of the outcomes of how you communicate and how feedback is shared, how bad news is shared, how, like all these things that we outlined in the chapter, I don't know, it just really like clicked. So that's my number one. I love our chapter on delegation. Um, and I think we've gotten some good feedback from some of our early reviewers. We have two sort of personas that we talk about in the delegation chapter:
Mm-hmm.
the hoarder, and the minimalist. And so it's so relatable because like I've been both of these types. Like I have hoarded tasks, like as almost like, it's about power. I have all this responsibility. I'm hoard. And I've also, been Teflon and tried to like, not have any tasks, and just things bounce off and I'm just pushing it, to my team or elsewhere. And I don't know, I just like the detail we go into around, different delegation styles. And then, there's a very, I think, practical framework around, how to delegate, when to delegate, how to notice patterns when
Mm-hmm.
when it might time for, you to delegate something. So that one's a good one that is, in my top three. So hard to choose the last one. I think it's the last chapter in the book. It's about focus.
Mm-hmm.
I was so lost in the early days of being a new first time, founder and CEO of like, what do I do? What's my role? What should I be
Mm-hmm.
focusing? And I think that's one of the stories that is shared in that chapter, is just that feeling of like, gosh, what do I do? And it's also one of those things that in my coaching practice, when I say to executives and founders that I'm coaching, like, hey, like, why don't you take a day or even a half a day, a few hours, and just, go to a coffee shop, go do something, and really like spend time focusing on specific areas of the business, like get out of the day to day. And it's so hard for them to let go and think like, no, I can't have time for that. Well, if you don't have time for that, when do you have time for strategy? When do you have time? Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I think yeah, I think the focus chapter really, really stands out. And, I think we've gotten a lot of good feedback from some of our testimonials and folks who have read the early books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great chapter. Also, just always seems hard to imagine for founders, or whenever you're stuck in the weeds, that you are the only person who can pull you out of it. And that it's also okay to take a little bit of time every week to focus on the bigger things. That there's always this story behind there. So I want to be there for my team, and there's just so much going on. But that's exactly also why there's no time.
Right. Right. Yeah. We should talk before we wrap up. Kind of maybe one of our last topics is who was the book for?
Mm-hmm.
Like who'd we write the book for? I think we often say like this is the book we always wanted. So it's certainly, with a focus towards founders and CEOs, early stage, startups, folks beginning their careers in leadership. But it's really like, I think, a book for, leaders across early stage as well as later stage companies, enterprise stage companies as well. I know my background's as a product leader, chief product officer, product person through and through. So I think like that's an area where, I think the book really resonates. And then, I don't know, Mathias as a engineering leader and CTO. But yeah, I don't know, think about like, are there, like, who did you write the book for, Mathias, when you were really thinking about who would want to pick this up?
I think it's some way. I also thought about, fellow founders and, our clients also, where, I have many conversations where it's like, can I just hand you the book? You're going to read the chapter on what we talked about today, and then we'll discuss, what you're going to do with it next time around. So I think I that's almost a success metric to me. It's like whenever I could think about a conversation like this, or I'm in it, and it's like I could just give you the book because it's like, oh, okay, this is a spot on topic. I've worked a lot with also more senior and middle managers, director levels, and line managers over the years, and like today, I worked with a product manager, for example, and the issues that they were having were about, having difficult conversations almost, or how to make a productive meeting in some way, which we also talk about extensively in the book. And I think no matter what level you work on, you can find something in there. Like some parts of what we talk about require maybe more influence over the larger culture in the company, but other parts you could just start doing in your team. Like you could change the meeting culture in your particular team at any point in time, or the feedback culture, right? At least the feedback culture within your team, or how you structure your time, how you delegate, how your team makes decisions. All of those things are applicable to small teams just as much as they are to early stage, later stage, and really large companies. I think that's the beauty of this book and how it evolved almost over time.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So we should probably wrap up. The book, like we said, will be coming out spring of 2025, spring of this year. And you can always go to our website, which is intentionalorganization.com, to sign up for updates, to get notified when it will be published and available for purchase. And yeah, thank you, Mathias. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Toodles.
Bye-bye.